I'm going to, again, please bear with me. I'm going to begin to invite our panel to the stage. We have Christina Fernandez, who's joining us. Um, Emily Duggan from Moms Against the Norm is coming up. Uh, who else do I have? I'm looking for Karen Litsky. Uh, I might need a hi, everybody. You're currently on mute. Do I have to unmute you, or are you?
Hello.
Hi, Emily.
Hello. Can
While
you
I'm
hear me?
looking, while I'm looking for our other panelist, uh, we've got Chris, we've got Emily, we've got Karen Litsky, who I need a username for, and okay, so Karen will join us in a couple of moments. My brain has gone blank. Are we missing somebody?
Mike.
Mike, of course. Uh, Mike's going to join us. Uh, while we're waiting for the next two to join, uh, Christina, why don't you give us a bit of background? Where are you? How did you get involved in this? A bit of your story.
Oh my gosh, does that go into my time?
So
Um,
you're Kitchener Waterloo.
yeah, I'm in the Waterloo region, so that's Cambridge, Kitchener, Waterloo, and all the townships here. Um, yeah, I'm in Waterloo, Wilmot area, but that's where I
And
ran. So my
we
story, I mean, starts way back, but it was more, you know, I don't know if you know this, Shannon, but my story starts way back when my kids started school and I realized peanuts weren't allowed. And I'm like, no way. Like as a diet, like I was gonna fight that. So I mean, and that changed. We went into lockdown, then it was, their health in terms of their masking and questioning that. And it was more just the process. And I think that's what parents actually need to understand how broken our systems are, is once they get involved in asking those questions and seeing how you're just getting the runaround and no one really takes accountability anywhere. um, and then, I was made privy to the meetings, so the school board meetings, which I saw Carolyn Brajowski, I saw Cindy Watson's, get shut down for very reasonable motions, like to
Mhm.
educate the parents, to help them understand what critical race theory is, what white privilege is. Our board shut that down. No, we will not define what white privilege is. We will not tell the parents what critical race theory means and how it's being taught in the classes. Like, if this doesn't wake people up, I mean, and it does, as long as they see it. But that's the thing, right? Like, they need to see it. They need to see what's happening and then they wake up. But yeah, and then I ran for school board trustee.
And that's how
Um,
we met. We met
that's how we met.
during the
Yeah,
campaign. That's right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then just never stopped. It was never about getting a seat on the board. That's the thing. Like, it's not going to stop there. Like, this is about doing right by our kids, right? And so we had 11 people running here, actually. Like, 11
Mhm.
organically came together. There's 11 seats on the Waterloo Region District School Board, and then we had 2 that we know of running in the Waterloo Catholic District School Board. They're actually sitting there now, so that's great. We have 3 here, so
Super.
that's what people are seeing: 3 to 8, 3 to 8, 3 to 8, and they're
Yeah.
really starting to notice that. Um, and I think that's another area we need to, like, a call to action on our part. Like, we
Absolutely.
we are
Yeah.
so aware of the system that people need to understand that voting, that less than democratic society, and how it's kind of rigged in the sense that, as Bruce has said, it's set up as, to work for the government. It's not set up to work for the people just because they say they're public servants. It's not
Well,
so.
so
Yeah.
you've got a bit of a presentation you're going to share with us. I'm going to invite Emily to introduce herself. Emily is founder Moms Against the Norm, co-founder out in
Yeah,
British
founder of
Columbia.
Moms Against the Norm. Yep. Hi.
So I'm over I'm over in British Columbia, and I founded a group of concerned mothers. We call ourselves Moms Against the Norm, and we have spent the last year uh, doing our best to keep what happens in public education public information. So we have a Rumble channel where we have a couple different series where we have conversations with people. We have a series called Storytime with Emily, where I read some of the literature that is available in our schools. Um, we have a series called The Parent's Voice, where we did a campaign. We invited parents across British Columbia to send us their stories with their experience with gender ideology, queer theory, SOGI 123 in our public education. And I read those letters out so that other families who maybe experience the same thing realize that they're not alone, that their voice does matter. And just to let people who aren't aware of what's going on, that yes, this is real, it is happening, and in BC, in Canada, not just down in Florida, and in the UK, it's here too.
Yeah.
So that's who I am.
Mike, you're in the Durham region.
Yes, yes. Out here in Durham, I think we've been first in a number of things in sort of uncovering some of the insanity. So I was involved in uncovering some books back in 2021, which I'm going to talk about later, and things just sort of led from there. But I've been a somewhat of an advocate with the school board. My kids are a little older now, but they were doing things like putting education funds into building platforms or patios for smokers, and things like this that were going on that just didn't make sense.
Great. Well, the reason, I mean, all of us have been involved in the development of and the creation of the PRCOC. That's the Parents' Rights Coalition of Canada. This is a growing organization. If you go to the website, underneath the registration page that all of you are familiar with, how you came to this event, there is some details about our, we collaborated and created a white paper around gender ideology and our position on that. Last summer, as the organization was forming, came up with a statement of principles. These are 9 overarching principles that we have agreed upon together. We call those the September principles. And we have a number of different organizations who are involved. We're at the stage now where we are considering governance models and building a formal board of directors, and doing more events like this so that we can share our experiences, share some best practice, communicate together a nationally coordinated and understood messaging strategy, that we can, as I mentioned in that AI little presentation, we have the ability to go into specific questions in specific provinces in Canada and provide groups like yours that you're involved with the kind of tailored information about public sentiment, but also about what kind of messaging is helpful in terms of communicating with local media and not getting into trouble around the words that we use. So, the horse is out of the barn on this one already. Parents' rights is actually has slightly more negative connotations in the public mind than not. So the activists have taken control of this idea of parents' rights, and we learned from Bruce Party that, in fact, when it comes to law and education, we kind of don't have those rights, and so that may be part of the reason why that isn't as effective for us. However, when we talk about schools keeping secrets, it's off the chart in our favor. So there's ways that we can collaborate, and we can talk to people about this that we know is going to be more effective and have a greater level of impact. So we're waiting. Karen Litsky is going to join us. Karen Litsky was also someone who ran for school trustee in British Columbia in the Lower Mainland, and most recently ran for an open Conservative seat in I want to say in the Mount Pleasant riding in Vancouver, which is one of the wokest in the province of BC. Karen's been working with Our Duty Canada and some others to engage with the consultation process in Saskatchewan as well as in New Brunswick. So we're really fortunate to have this panel here today. Do you guys want to do a coin toss as to who wants to present first? Does someone want to go last? Karen indicated, I just got a text. She's joining us shortly. She wanted to go last in this presentation. So
I know Emily was saying she couldn't stay for the whole thing, so I don't know if she wants to go first.
Emily?
I can go first.
It's totally
I'll make sure.
not to volunteer you or anything.
That's all right. Sacrifice me first. It's okay.
Okay,
No,
so
you
you should have authority to share a screen if you have some slides. If not, it's perfectly okay to
All right, can you guys hear me? Okay, I'm going to try and share my screen. All right, can you see a slide? Oh, I'm going backwards. Sorry, guys. First time slide shower here. Okay. So I'm Emily Duggan, and I'm the founder of Mums Against the Norm. We're out of the West Kootenays of British Columbia. And again, you can find us on Rumble under Mums Against the Norm, or you can email us at mumsagainstthenorm@gmail.com. So we are a small group of moms who, in our quote unquote spare time, we work to share awareness on gender ideology, queer theory, and SOGI 123 in the British Columbia public education system. In 2023, we had some pretty good wins, and our first win was in working with other members of our community, we were able to cancel Drag Queen Storytime at the Nelson Public Library in March of 2023. We did that with
Emily, just a quick, we see a white screen on the share. I don't know if you have a slide up or.
Oh yeah, I do. Oh, it says it's paused. Weird. Hang on. Thanks for telling me. Is it there now?
We don't see content yet. I don't.
Oh man.
We could try, and I will be your PowerPoint facilitator if you drop it into the Signal chat, if you have capacity to do that quickly.
Oh no, I don't know where it went. It like ran away from me here. It says it's there, but it says click to exit full screen. There we go. Sorry, guys. Isn't that the way?
We're all just parents here.
Oh yeah.
Now yeah.
Did it again.
That's what I say. Doesn't need to be perfect to be powerful.
Mm-hmm. We've said a lot that 80% rule is what we're going to go with when making decisions. Perfect is the enemy of good. You can just go from that. We can see that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So our first win, sorry guys, our first win of 2023 was we were able to get Drag Queen Storytime at our local public library canceled. We did that without a physical protest. It was all done through email correspondence. So first, we sent our first letter on February 16th, 2023, after we had found out about the event and were approached by many different groups in the community asking for help. We didn't know how to help, so we sat down and first things first, we combed through the Nelson Public Library policy manual. So when we constructed our first letter in February of 2023 and sent it on the 16th, we sent it to the chief librarian and we quoted library policy 5.4.1, the code of conduct, which basically states that the library will maintain public trust. So we argued that this event would betray public trust with certain members of the community. We also argued a couple other points from the policy in there, that they would act with reasonable care, integrity, and diligence in the performance of their duties and responsibilities to provide courteous, competent, and responsive services. Another point that we brought up from their own policy manual was personal, discriminatory, or sexual harassment of any nature will not be tolerated. So for that, we argued that depending on what drag performances were given, it could be considered sexually harassment to some members of the community. And then, oh, it doesn't want to work like that. Okay, on February 17th, the next day, we received, so this was a mass email campaign that we put out with that letter. So over 100 people joined our email campaign, and they sent that same letter signed with their name, their postal code, and phone number. The next day, everybody who sent a letter received the same generic reply, which did not touch on a single policy point that we had brought up. We responded on February 20th with an email back to the chief librarian, and we included the board of trustees. In this email, we repeated the code of conduct from the policy manual, and then we added in criminal code. So we added in the criminal code number 175-1 under sexual offenses and public morals, disorderly conduct. And it states anyone who exposes or exhibits an indecent exhibition in a public space is guilty of an offense, which would be the case if the performance mirrored that of what the public considers to be a traditional drag performance. So that was, we sent that off, again, a mass email campaign on February 20th. And on February 21st, we received the exact same generic reply from the library. They didn't touch again on any of the policy nor the criminal code. So on February 26th, we did another mass email campaign of a third letter. This time we wrote to our mayor, our city mayor. We again repeated the public library policy as well as the criminal code, and we requested her assistance. She denied our request. So on March 4th, I sent a fourth email. This was from me personally, and in it, I repeated a public statement that I had made. The online conversation around this became very toxic, as I'm sure many of you are aware of, as it happens in other communities across the country. And so the online conversation around the drag queen story time was very, very toxic. And I had been issuing public statements asking people to not protest the event in person. It was whether or not anybody agreed with it. It's a child's event, and we didn't want to cause the any negative side effects of a protest in front of kids at a kids event. So I shared my public statement with the chief librarian, the mayor, the board of trustees, and I pointed out that if the library chose to move forward with this event, they would be considered liable if anything happened to any of the guests or performers due to the big emotions the event was causing in our community. After biting our fingernails to find out what was going to happen, 2 days before the event was to happen, Drag Queen Story Time was canceled at the Nelson Public Library. Now, it wasn't exactly a clean-cut, happy ending. Instead of holding the event at the library, the event was held outside City Hall, outside. Tents were provided, MLAs attended. It was a massive showing, and we did not protest it because everybody has the right to protest, and that's what they were doing. Later on, the event was held at a church, and again, we did not protest that event because our goal was to keep it out of the public library, and we succeeded in that goal. We considered the church to be a private venue, and private venues should be able to hold whatever they choose. So, and again, still not over. Just when we thought the dust had settled, the chief librarian put out public statements that the reason that they had canceled the event was due to threats. So this takes me into my next point that I'd like to talk about today, which is filing Freedom of Information requests. So as far as we could see, because we drafted the letters ourselves, and unless somebody had made an edit to, which certainly an individual could do, however, we were pretty confident that the threats had not come from us. So there was a police investigation that had been spurred over the allegations. And a member of our community ended up filing a Freedom of Information request when the file was closed. And we were fortunate enough to receive 282 pages of the RCMP, or the Nelson Police Department, file and report on whether or not the Drag Queen Storytime is canceled due to threats. Here on the 272nd page, down where the arrow points, you will see it says, finally, the only instances where any truly questionable statements were made was from a supporter of Drag Story Time, or Drag Story Hour, towards a possible protester. So the important thing that we learned in filing the Freedom of Information request is that it can clarify a lot of confusing information that gets put out there based on nothing, really. And so we learned from that filing a Freedom of Information request is probably one of the best ways that you can finish off a task. So our task with Drag Queen Storytime was to get it canceled. And from that, we were sideswiped with false allegations of threats, which, after filing a Freedom of Information request, we were able to publicize that those allegations were false, no threats were made, and we were able to clear up some serious public confusion. So moving forward, we found that Freedom of Information requests were so valuable that we have filed quite a few now. And one of the bigger ones that we have filed, which has gotten quite a bit of airtime that maybe many of you have seen, is we filed the Freedom of Information request for September 20th, the Million March for Children in British Columbia. Now, to file a Freedom of Information request, and I'll drop this in the chat so that anybody can just copy and paste and pull it out. But I've organized all of the Freedom of Information links by province. Each province has a different link and a different avenue to go to file it, but they're all pretty straightforward and simple. I know from experience in British Columbia, there's a minimum $10 fee. So on to September 20th. I was lucky enough on September 20th to participate in the Million March for Children protest, supporting parental inclusion in our children's education. And I attended the march in Surrey, BC, where we had between an estimate of 3,000 to 4,000 protesters on our side. It was pretty great. It was overwhelming for me, a small town girl. And after the march, there was a lot of questions on how successful it was, what happened, how many people showed up. Mainstream media, as we all know, did not do an honest reporting job. And so in mid-November, we filed a Freedom of Information request asking for the total number of absent students in British Columbia. On January 9th, I got an email saying, with a PDF attached, saying that my Freedom of Information request had been fulfilled. So upon opening that PDF, as you can see here, I got the number of absent students from each district across British Columbia with a grand total at the end. However, if you look towards the red arrows, you'll see that it says page 4 of 5 and page 5 of 5, which was really curious to me because I only got 2 pages. So where were the other 3 pages, the first 3 pages? Now, always ask. If you don't ask, you get nothing. The worst case scenario is you get told no. So I emailed back my caseworker for the Freedom of Information request, asking for about the first 3 pages. The answer I got, I'm still not sure I understand what she means. She apologized for the confusion. They decided the first 3 pages were determined to not be responsive to my request, so they didn't include them in the email. So I asked if I could see them anyways. And 13 days later, just at the beginning of this week on January 23rd, I received the first 3 pages for my Freedom of Information request on September 20th for British Columbia. And this is the first time that I will be taking them public. So that's exciting for me. But here's what they look like. They're very informative. It was 3 full pages on September 20th in British Columbia from district to district. They charted our actions on that day. So that is very interesting. I'm really glad I asked for it, which is why I always, always, always ask. So you can see here, and I wish I could make it bigger for you because it's written quite small, but it's very interesting to me what they have cataloged. So if you go along the top, it's got the school district number, the school district name, and then it has the confirmed protest. And this column on all 3 pages is empty, which makes me wonder if there was something there that they deleted before they gave to me. I don't know if I'll ever know that, but the next column is the tracking issues. And that's interesting. They wrote things like in School District 20 for Kootenai, Columbia. They wrote things like unsure if West Kootenai's protest will be occurring in SD8, SD10, and SD19 as well. West Kootenai's protest poster indicates there won't be a march. Instead, they will keep their children home from school. Trail is confirmed, SD20 from SST meeting at statue across from Kaminko area. So those are like some pretty detailed points. But what really got my attention was if you'll look down here at School District 33 under the next column where it says September 20th events, they highlighted and it says Chilliwack protest remain downtown. They highlighted the fact that Barry Neufeld was present, which is interesting if you don't know who Barry Neufeld is. He was a school board trustee in British Columbia, no longer a school board trustee in British Columbia due to ridiculous drummed up legal issues. He's been in and out of court with current trustees. There's a lot of controversy going on with Barry Neufeld. As far as I'm concerned, he's a wonderful man. And I think it's interesting that they clocked where he was that day. Finally, the last column of the sheet, it compares the absences of September 20th to the 19th. Now, we have since receiving this information, filed another Freedom of Information request because we're not sure that the 19th and the 20th is the best comparison. So we've filed asking for the Wednesday previous to the September 20th and the Wednesday following September 20th. We're aware that there were certain families that decided to keep their children out all week for the week of September 20th, the day before, the day after. It was a Wednesday, so breaking up the week, some families took advantage of that. We haven't got the results back for that FOI yet, but when we do, of course, we'll make it public. So it's very, very interesting, all of this information, and they have it all cataloged for every single district in British Columbia. And again, we're very proud of the efforts made by everybody who was able to come together in British Columbia on September 20th. Our total absences for September 20th was 96,872, and it was a collaborative effort made by really great people coming from many different backgrounds across the province, and I was really proud to be a part of that. So again, here's each province has their own link to file an FOI, and we really, really, really want to stress that understanding policy, whether it be a library policy because you're combating a drag queen story time, or whether it be an administration policy for a school district because you're battling school district policy, it's really important to download that manual, and I highly suggest printing it out. What we're seeing happen across the province right now, especially in our education administrations, is they are going through and they are renewing policies, they are editing policies, they are making changes to them, and those changes are significant to parents because the changes are creating blocks in the way that parents are able to communicate with boards, with administrations, to get their concerns and questions across. So if you can, and I really, really suggest that you do, look up your policy, print it off, look up to see if any policies are in review, again, with your educational administrations or with the library, anything really. And keep an eye on that because that's something that's really going on right now. Yeah, so that's the end of my presentation. And just again, Moms Against the Norm is committed to keeping what happens in public education, public information.
That's a great tagline, Emily. It's having a good tagline is makes your organization memorable and the work that you do stick to what you do. And I learned that in business networking over the years, and maybe we can come up with one for the PRCOC. Christina, you're going to talk about education alternatives, and you held an event a couple of weeks ago that was very successful.
Mhm.
And you need screen sharing as well.
No, I didn't have any slides.
There's
Nope.
there's no obligation. Give us a rundown of what the event was about. How was it attended? What were people's
Yeah.
responses?
Yeah, I mean, I have some, if you don't mind me going through, I wanted to answer that question too, in terms of, what's working and what's not working. I think it's hard because I think it all has a place. We all have our own opinions, and I want everyone to express those, and we've got our own experiences. But for example, protests are something that some people, a lot of us have done the protests, and some people don't think they're helpful. Some people will say that, we need to be writing letters to our MPs. And I think that it all has a place, right? Like for the protests, they might not have a direct impact on evoking change, but it results in people turning their heads and asking questions and unifying and gathering and connecting, and standing up for one, like as one for a purpose. And all of those things are so powerful and have a place. And we all have different interests too. So here in Waterloo Region, we call ourselves, we don't really brand or anything. I love having that, like having a tagline, I think is so great. The same time, we're seeing that we're all, like, we're so individual, right? And that's part of what makes it so powerful here. We've got different interests, different strengths. And, we've got professionals, healthcare professionals, we've got educators, trade workers, university professors, a variety of faiths, ethnicities. And that's what we saw even with the marches coming together, right? It's all different people uniting for this cause. And something I continually iterate is that the fact that we don't agree on everything. And I think that's a really good thing that we don't. We challenge one another. We have our own ideas and our thoughts questioned within the community, which I think is vital for anyone unifying within their local areas and abroad. And I think that we've moved away from community, which is something that I think it's John Taylor Gatto that talks about networking versus community. And genuine community is where people come together organically rather than that imposed structure. And I think that's what's happening in our little like areas, right? So here in the Waterloo region, we call ourselves Power, Parents of Waterloo Region, people of Waterloo Region, educating minds, parents or people of Waterloo Region. And it's almost what we want to see in society as we move, like we want more community. Like we have our eyes so much on a global scale. Even my kids, for their theme, for their STEAM fair project, it's, how to protect our earth. Like we've got websites and social media that allow branding and an incredible amount of reach, which is so great. All across the globe, but it's almost like, why are we going to bother with our own hometowns? Why are we going to bother with people you don't even know in your own regions? And I think that's a little bit of a gift for us to come back and create that community within, and have these movements made within these communities. And I'm so honored to be standing with the parents and people of Waterloo Region. Speaking of all our differences, I wanted to speak a little bit because I know we wanted to talk a little bit about calls to action as well, and going through kind of the things that we're doing. I know Shannon, you and I had spoken about kind of going through that in terms of how what we're kind of doing over here, and maybe it helps with kind of coming up with some things that people can be doing where they are as well. So we too do the FOIs. We have an FOI crew. Emily did such a fantastic job going into the nitty-gritty of that. And, but you know what? Like we have people who are interested in being more involved in the process. So like, submitting those requests. And then we've got people who like to report on the information that we receive, or maybe just they have really great ideas for FOI requests. Right. So just even within the working groups, there's a variety of capacities and contributions happening. We remember that we're not getting paid for this. We all have families to take care of, and we take on what we can when we can. There's no expectation or judgment. We've got a letter writing and editing team. So we have had some fantastic open letters going out, not only to our school board corporations, but also to both the ministry and the municipality. So really depending on what's going on in your area. But also remembering that just because we have a letter writing and editing team, it doesn't mean that everything that is posted has to go through the letter writing and editing team, right? Like that they're there to serve and they enjoy doing that. So if someone has something to voice, but they don't really like writing letters, but they want it to be in letter form, then we have people helping with that. If you love writing letters, then write your own letter. And so that's something to keep in mind too. We have a protest organizing group, so people who are interested in doing that. I have a note here for the book tent event. For those of you who don't know, the book tent event, it has been phenomenal. And for those of you who do protests in your area, I highly recommend doing a book tent with that as well. We have a policy review working group. And so Emily actually reminded me because I don't know about all districts, but for us, there's actually policies that come out that you can review. So there's specific policies that come out that you get to have a say in. And now Emily's probably completely right too, in that you could probably take any policy. I don't know 100%, but like you could probably take any policy and be like, for instance, the AP 1235 policy over here. That wasn't in review. We're just like, we're not okay with this. We're going to talk about it. And so we can delegate on that as well. Like you can just bust out anything that you want. But know that there are some that come out. We have a social media crew that just started. We've got some legal action being taken. Looks like we might have a school council working group now too. Lots of initiatives happening there. I don't know if anyone's going to be able to talk about school councils. That's another good one to talk more about. We have more and more people standing up before the board in the form of delegations, and we've had some tremendous ones happening in the Waterloo Region District School Board and more to come. And then those are for those of us who've been around the track a few times. We help others, just to kind of go through the how-to, like how do you become a delegate? But navigating through, the website, finding out where your trustees are, finding out where you can send letters to, all of those things. How to look up a questionable book in the library commons, that sort of thing. Asking questions to your teachers, to your principals. And then one of our major umbrellas is the Alternative Education Initiative, which is three-pronged. So one being alternative schools. And so we came up with a curriculum team. And as I'm going through this, guys, so quickly, I do realize that it seems overwhelming. And I want you to understand that it didn't happen overnight, but it also didn't take long to do. And again, I don't say that to be overwhelming, but to tell you what's possible, because it was and continues to be so organic, right? Like this is based on people and parents' capacities and interests and seeing, what we're needing within our community, which also changes, like in the end of 2022, we were like, all right, so we've been delegating, we've been, protesting, we've been, we had those selection elections happening over here where 2 people were selected to replace 2 vacant positions on the board, right? Like we had so many things that would perk people's curiosities and awareness, but the board is not budging. And we have more and more people standing up, but the board is not going to budge. So we don't really care what it looks like. I don't really care what it looks like. I just need high quality education for our kids, right? And our future. So and it doesn't look like we're getting that from the board. So what do we do? So we were really highly motivated to start schools. And so we started the work. We put a curriculum team together. We started working on other logistics in terms of coming up with fundraising and sustainable ways to keep up the funding with the school, because we didn't want just another private school, right? Like we already have tremendous private schools in the area. What we wanted was almost like a parallel system. How do we get the children who want to leave the publicly funded school system as they choose to? How can we make it more accessible to everyone, right? Like, wouldn't that be more democratic? Wouldn't that be more equitable? So, but things evolved there too, right? So like as solutions came up, like CCEM, who helps make existing spaces into schools, that helps with the spaces. And the second prong to that, and all of this kind of helped us be more serious about looking into the options for having our funding follow the student. So a call to action there for those who are working on that to collaborate and let's leverage our time. I think we are seeing the powerful a powerful thing is to obtain those numbers or capture that majority of tax-paying citizens who do not consent, right? Kind of like what Bruce was saying as well, but like who does not consent to this? I mean, if you get the majority and you show that, if it's truly a democratic society, how do they argue that? And also to recognize or to ensure that people are realizing that we recognize that this is becoming theft at this point because we're not agreeing to our money to go to these places. So last but not least, I know Shannon wanted to talk a little bit more about this. The third prong to that alternative education umbrella is that information, parent info sessions, letting them know what's happening, letting them know. And this ended up being more of an info session in terms of options, an open house. So we call it School Options Open House and an info night. And that happened on January 8th. It was a tremendous success. What a testament to what people are wanting. I mean, the house was packed, the doors were open. So we had people watching from the foyer. There's no doubt that people are ready for something different. And if the publicly funded school systems aren't going to start listening to what parents have to say and start putting that in action, people are ready to move. And that in itself was incredibly powerful. We have a breakdown on the whole, and that's kind of why it's kind of summed it up. We've got a whole breakdown of the event on a Substack. It should be out any day. It's just that we had some recording issues in terms of volume, so we're hoping to have that sorted out. And but all of the details on the event are there. Happy to go through it in more detail. Happy to show people or go through the how to if they're wanting to do that in their own areas or collaborate to do something more central. I know for us, we're going to be doing more. Some, are already asking for the same kind of event, which was more of an overview. It was more of so we have David Haskell and Jeff Horseman come in and talk about education versus indoctrination. They did a fabulous job. Also debunking some of, the biases when it comes to are kids going to get what they need from from an alternative to the publicly funded school system, kind of what Bruce Party was talking about, right? Like, yes, they can. It's it's not that the publicly funded school system is what's going to save everyone. So we had that. Carolyn Rajowski came up, which was a treat as well. And then we had a panelist of options. So homeschooling, pods, creating schools in existing spaces, like I mentioned, alternative, like more natural approaches, alternative schools and nature-based learning. And then also Cindy Watson was there to support and talk about publicly funded school systems being an option as well, right? And so some are ready to get more honed in on some of those. Some missed the event and they're like, can we put another one on? And so we're going to be getting more feedback to see where we're going next, but we're already knowing that people want to hone in on the particular topics. So the how-to of homeschooling, pods, alternative schools, what does the cost look like, the time, the logistics, and also helping create school choice is another thing that people are really interested in helping with. And some want to know more about making a difference within the school system. So lots going on. Right. And again, I don't say that to overwhelm. And I am going to say this, and it might not be a popular opinion. It might not make people feel warm and fuzzy towards me, but I think that we need to stop using that as an excuse, right? Like we all get 24 hours in a day. We're all here to take things on in a variety of capacities. And so there's really no excuse to have our heads in the sand. Find out what's going on, and rather than fearing it, do something about it, right? And unify with those who are already doing something about it. Leverage your time, work synergistically. Like, I can't tell you how beautiful the process is in that alone. We meet our soul brothers and sisters, and it's been tremendous. It comes with some hard stuff too, but in the end, I think we're stronger and better at the end for it. And regardless of our stance, and I keep repeating this, the undeniable truth is that the publicly funded school system is supposed to exist for us as as much as we believe it, right? Like we believe that it should be for the people, as Bruce has taught us, they have other plans. But when it's not working for us anymore and it's not working for our children, we don't it's not just the right to leave, like we have an obligation to leave. And so I encourage people to get involved in any capacity that they can right now.
Thanks so much, Christina. It's as maybe you said, or someone else, we're basically, it was David earlier in the day, we're basically 2 years, almost to the week, where Carolyn Brzezowski stood up against the Waterloo Region District School Board and raised the question around some of those books. That really was a flashpoint for an awful lot of people following this issue. And we don't, I never sought to be a public person. I didn't. I happened to be, because of business training, I happened to be fine to stand up in front of a crowd of people. I'm okay to talk in public. I'm very fortunate that my partners at the firm aren't going to cancel me. And in fact, that they've been very, very supportive in the last couple of years. But other people don't have that. And when you talked about, different people have different skills and different, attributes. Some people are going to want to stay behind the scenes, and they do really amazing work behind the scenes. Peter Sim mentioned the group Concerned Canadians. These are policy people, highly educated, highly credentialed. They don't want anything to do with being in the public. They work very, very diligently on these policy things, and that's their area of expertise. So I think you're absolutely right that we need to kind of figure out where our skills, our interests, where our concerns line up, get involved in our communities. And the group in Kitchener-Waterloo has been an inspiration to many, many people across the country. So we're thankful for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks for the space to share what we're doing.
Mike, Durham region. For those who don't know, we're tuning in from across the country. Durham is a little bit east of Toronto. Peterborough, I want to say Oshawa.
Oshawa? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the boundaries are, but it extends fairly far north from there. And so there's a lot of rural and urban.
So are you sharing slides, Mike, or do you want
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'll get started here. So hopefully you can see that. Is that showing up? Good to go.
Yep, I can see it, Mike. And we've got we're 10 minutes to 4. I wanted to kind of wrap as close to 4:30 as we can. We're still waiting on. Oh, Karen is in. So you go ahead. I'll see if I can bring Karen into the group and hear from her. And off you go, Mike.
Okay, I'll go quickly. So I'm part of an extended team of concerned parents in Durham region who've been trying to hold our local school board accountable. And in the process of doing so, I'm a contributor to this Protect Literacy. You can check out on Twitter. There's also a news feed. There's a website. So let me give you a little background on what's been happening over the past couple of years in Durham region. So in the fall of 21, in the midst of COVID, I started to notice claims on social media about some pretty crazy books being available in many schools. And frankly, I was skeptical. So I tried to see if I could find these books in the Durham board, and it didn't take very long for me to find some examples like what we heard about earlier. So I sent an email with some excerpts from 3 books to all of the trustees and just asked them, what do you think about this? Within a couple of hours, the lead trustee gave me a call and told me I'd ruined her day because she couldn't believe what I had presented in that email. It was a cordial phone call, and she seemed genuinely interested in getting to the bottom of it. She called the content of the books, quote, very alarming, while other trustees use words like shocking and disturbing. And I was thanked for bringing this to their attention. So a review of these books was undertaken by the board administration at the urging of the trustees. I didn't actually ask for this, by the way. I just wanted to know how all of this was justified. Coincidentally, though, about a month later, the public access that I had used to locate the books in the school library was cut off from public view and remains inaccessible to the public, kind of like they have something to hide. So in the spring of 22, while the book review was underway, I had a series of discussions with the Equitable Education Director, and those discussions helped me to understand how the canard of human rights had been weaponized and just how confused the school boards really are about this topic. Now, ironically, at the same time that DDSP was rolling out this new woke human rights policy, they created a national scandal because they decided to remove some books by an Indigenous author named David Robertson. And this was covered across the country in different newspapers. So this action was widely condemned, and they ended up reversing their decision. However, the situation is, I think, a clear example of how the school boards cannot possibly navigate the contradictory ideology that they're espousing. They talk about diversity while believing that essentially all Indigenous people, they all believe the same thing. Just like LGBT people, they're all one big monolith who believe the same thing. So after a long 7 months of waiting for the book review to complete, the verdict came in that, hey, these books are just fine. They were, quote, found to align with the district's human rights and equity policies, but they gave no other justification or insight into this. It was a very opaque process, and there was no accountability. So I tried to reach out to Carolyn Morton, the DDSP chair, who had her day ruined when she first learned about these books. But somehow I had become persona non grata to her and many of the other trustees. And by the way, all the details of these books and the official response are documented on the website link I provided there before. So I've got all the receipts for this. Going into the fall of 22, we had the municipal elections, but the woke ideology remained largely off the radar of most parents, unfortunately. So this was not yet an issue that influenced the trustee elections enough to change things much. But then things started to change in the spring of last year. A critical mass of people started attending board meetings and trying to make their voices heard. But like true authoritarians, DDSP tried to characterize the public participation as spiraling out of control and other fake news. But people from a diverse range of backgrounds were organizing together and finding unity and strength around what I think is just a natural parental desire to protect your kids. Parents were silenced, shut out of meetings, but the protests grew anyway. There were, going into the summer, grassroots petitions and information sharing. Some creative colleagues that part of our team have managed to infiltrate some union events and disrupt their anti-parent narrative because, well, guess what? It turns out that your typical trade union worker doesn't really want all this woke garbage. And of course, the 1 Million March for Children in September was very well attended in Durham. We even had a well-known trans woman speak in favor of parental rights right out in front of the Durham District School Board admin building. So we were crushing the media narratives that were wrongly trying to paint us as transphobes and so forth. So in terms of lessons learned, how this might be useful to others, I think these loud public protests are great, but they're not really the end game. we need sustained pressure. So call your trustees, email them, and demand accountability. Do the same with your local MPP, Stephen Lecce's office, your premier's office. Do FOIA requests, as have been mentioned before. It's the best $5 you'll ever spend. Our success so far in opening up dialogue with Durham District School Board has been to have a non-public meeting with a small group of about 6 of us with a small group of trustees and staff. This allows a more candid type of interaction because we don't have the type of drama that big public board meetings can have. So work as a team, be very businesslike, be very persistent, but be very polite at the same time. Also, you may find that trustees are not aware of some or many of the facts that you know, so don't assume that they know more than you do. There may be some trustees that are sympathetic towards your position too, so try to seek them out and give them the benefit of the doubt. But I think you need to be confident that the community widely supports us, and they just perhaps lack the confidence or the time to be outspoken. So in order to get them to listen to you, it's most important to show them that you're not the haters that they think you are based on what they've heard in the media. Okay, we don't hate anybody. We just have another opinion about how kids can best flourish in life. We aren't trying to shove anybody back in the closet. However, we want our beliefs and values to be fairly represented. They talk about diversity and inclusion, and so let's hold them accountable to that. We want diversity of thought. We want inclusion of our ideas and values. So study your board and MOE policy. We pointed out to the board that the Ontario curriculum doesn't have gender identity concepts in the lower grades, and we want them to abide by that. So do your homework, be evidence-based, show the receipts. Don't claim anything that you can't back up with data. Also, maintain a sense of humor. Some of their policies and materials are so inconsistent and so over the top that the jokes just write themselves. This is an example of using board data to debunk their claims. This is what I mean by using evidence and data to make your point. So here, if LGBT people are actually facing all these systemic barriers that they claim, then why are they more literate than straight people? And meanwhile, here's a huge inequity. These schools are not very far apart, but yet there's a huge inequity there that they're doing nothing about. So where are we? We've established with DDSB that the human rights argument is a canard, it's bogus. Meanwhile, the argument for parental rights is, I would argue, well established in international conventions, the Canadian Charter, Section 7, and in provincial court rulings and Supreme Court rulings. They may not be ready to admit this, but they have no counter argument. And this is notwithstanding the points about human rights tribunals that were mentioned earlier, because that is a problem. And by the way, you can get in touch with me, and I have the receipts on this claim as well. I think we knocked the trustees back on their heels a bit when we provided them with a deck of 100 PowerPoint slides. I think we established some good faith, and their reward is being able to have more tranquil public meetings. But ultimately, we need action at the political level. Politicians need to realize that we are the vast majority. We are allowing radical activists to be the tail wagging the dog, so to speak, and that needs to end. So PRCOC wants to take a leadership role in that battle. Together, I believe we can win this. And that's the end of my presentation. thanks for listening, and I hope that we can inspire some people to take action, get busy, and work with us.
Thanks so much, Mike. It's terrific to hear about the progress that you've made and the turnaround that you've experienced with your approach and engagement with the school board. That was probably the biggest success story that I hope people will take away from your presentation, is that you're able to get. I used to work for a company. They said we get shields down, right? We get people's automatic resistance to our proposition out of the way, and allow a conversation. Now, what comes out of the conversation, we can only follow through on and act in good faith. But getting those shields down and getting engaged is just such a milestone. I hope that the board is able to incorporate some of that and move away from some of the automatic animosity and hostility that you've been experiencing, that so many people across the country have, where we get the knee-jerk reaction, or as Melanie said early in the day, the thought-stopping cliche that just shuts down all conversation. So thanks so much again for your presentation, Mike. We have Karen Litsky here. And I mentioned, Karen, welcome. Before you joined, I mentioned that you we met after you ran for trustee back in 2022, and you recently ran, was it Mount Pleasant riding in Vancouver for the Conservative Party?
So.
There, we got your set. Oh, you're still on mute for some reason. Your mic comes on and then it goes off. Oh boy. Try one more time. And
no, I can't. It does nothing.
We got you.
Oh,
yep, it stayed on.
You can actually hear me?
It seemed like when you move your computer, it went to mute again. So just I'll keep an eye on it. And why don't you give us a little bit of background, because I did a brief introduction before you were able to join. I'm really thankful you're here. Tell us a bit about yourself, and then you have some projects you're working on that I think our audience would love to hear about.
Okay, that would be great. So let's just clarify. You can't hear me because I can neither hear nor see myself. So I can't even see myself. So I have no idea.
I can both see you and hear you. I think that's fair to say for everybody.
Okay, perfect. So I didn't want to waste a lot of time on background. I will just say, though, that I have been a political candidate on a number of occasions. I've run 5 campaigns in the past 5 years at every level of government, which I'm not going to recommend as a way to spend time. It's it's exhausting, Actually, I'm kidding. I do recommend getting involved in the political process, but perhaps not at that pace. So I'm here for Our Duty Canada, and I should clarify that at the outset. And do you want me to just swing into my remarks then? Is this sort of my 10 minutes?
Please, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to read my comments because I do apologize. I didn't have a lot of time to get ready for this. I never have anything else to do on Saturday mornings, but today I had another meeting locally that I needed to be in. So I kind of just wrote this, and I'm going to read it just to make sure that I get everything in. So I'm not a lawyer, but I'm taking on the role of spearheading Our Duty Canada's legal initiatives. I'm really pleased to be part of a group that can take legal action and is willing to do so. I have spent years observing teachers' unions and other special interest groups taking legal action in the school system, often using our tax dollars to do so, to pressure the courts to take away parent power and award equal or more power to these paid stakeholder groups. It has been very frustrating to see the courts succumb to the pressure and to watch the education system and family well-being deteriorate concomitantly. But the reality in the education system and public systems in general is that those who litigate make the law, and parents as an interest group have not made themselves seen and heard in court. So far, Our Duty Canada is an intervener applicant in the 2 bizarre court cases that are unfolding in Saskatchewan and New Brunswick. We have applied in both provinces, but have not yet heard whether we will be granted intervener status. I call these cases bizarre because litigation is occurring at entirely the wrong point in the story, being done by the wrong parties, and going in the wrong direction. This is quite instructive about how the law works, and it shows why I believe that in parent activism, litigation should be a strategy of first resort, not last resort. The whole narrative of parent exclusion from schools and ultimately from their kids' lives goes like this. And this is an abbreviated and slightly exaggerated version. And for a more detailed examination of the breadcrumb trail, I will refer you back to the webinar done a few months ago by the Executive Director of Kids First Canada, Helen Ward. I hope we can get a link to that as a resource. So what happened first, and this is going back decades, was that schools and education ministries squeezed parents out as both collective and individual participants in the system. Parents didn't litigate in response. Unions litigated, expanding their power, but parents didn't appear in most of those court cases. Then the special interests that benefit from excluding parents lobbied and manipulated their way into the schools, capturing the system, pushing out skills instruction and replacing it with social conditioning. And parents didn't litigate. Special interest groups did litigate, leveraging human rights and charter legislation to establish their power. Finally, the programs that overtly exploit and weaponize children became entrenched in schools, and still, parents didn't litigate. Parents did complain, though, and finally, two governments took note and changed their policies. The governments of Premier Blaine Higgs in New Brunswick and Scott Moe in Saskatchewan did not, however, restore parents to their original and rightful position as central players in making policy or as central decision makers for their children. They did not protect children from the predators who have invaded schools. They did not remove the predators, nor eliminate the tools used for predation. These premiers merely gave parents back one crumb. Before the age of 16 for their kids, the parents could now claim a right to be informed about the grooming, the exploitation, and the weaponization. One single crumb in return for all those losses. But for the special interest groups, that one crumb is still too much. They are now taking the government to court to challenge the return of that one crumb to mothers and fathers. And as parents, we are not even automatically a party to this lawsuit. These special interest groups are demanding that the government take away this one crumb that has been given to us. They are not even suing us, but suing the government about us. That is how peripheral we have become in law. We are almost mere spectators to our own fate, or worse, supplicants. We have to apply to the courts for intervener status. Fortunately, the courts seem inclined to grant it, but my point is this: we should not be mere interveners. This should have been our lawsuit. And if it it would have been if we had organized and raised funds to challenge governments when the first parts of our loaf were taken away, when our rights and entitlements were taken away in the first place. I believe we would never have gotten to the point where one crumb was all we had. At minimum, if we were the litigants, we could be asking the courts for more crumbs instead of begging to keep the only one we've got. So while we will be only interveners in these cases, which means making only brief written and oral submissions to the court while the special interests have potentially days of argument, there is scope for many other cases to be undertaken to restore the parental role in Canadian law, with some euthanasia groups now advocating for 12-year-olds to be able to access MAID. It has never been more urgent for parents to do so. Not all these cases fall to parents of transgender identifying children, obviously. All sorts of parent advocacy groups are needed. Groups may even form around one objective and find that another cause merits their attention later. The point is to have the group. We never solved the problems of deteriorating literacy and numeracy instruction in schools. In part because of parents' absence from the courts, there is a lot of unfinished business left undone by parents of previous generations that is landing on the shoulders of the parents of today. It is worth clarifying why parents have not litigated in the past. We are, first of all, difficult to organize. You know this. We disagree on many things, and some of us want for our children what others abhor. Even two parents of one child often disagree on things, and we disagree with our kids. Most of us also do not see the other parties as our opponents. They include the people to whom we entrust our children every day, after all. The interest groups include our political allies, political parties that we voted for. We may support the special interest organizations like the CCLA. So we don't see the threat that these apparently friendly people pose to parents. But also, parents are a transient presence in the school system. Just as we really figure out what is going on, our kids are out of the system. We disengage, and a new cohort arrives, and parents with kindergartners seem to have little in common with parents of graduates. At least so it seems. So we have little contact across generations. And there is no collective learning, no institutional memory. By the time the full impact of anecdotal report cards is being felt, no one remembers how the change from letter grades was rammed through against parent opposition. So I'm a big advocate of parents connecting across generations. It's one of the reasons why, although I'm a parent from the 1990 to 2000s era, I'm still I still have a foot in this camp. Besides having a basis for belonging to our duty, I really believe in parents of various generations connecting. That's a new capacity we have thanks to the internet, and I really think we should use it. And I'm happy to engage with anybody who is interested in utilizing the law to advance the cause of parents' role in their children's lives.
Thank you so much, Karen. We're really grateful for the work and your dedication. I know you've been at this a long, long time. If you were to think back, what made you decide to take action? Were you at some point like other parents and just kind of going along? Was it? I've asked our other panelists this before. I don't know if we've ever had that conversation.
I don't think we have, and I don't know if it's a particular quirk of personality. I've maybe always been a little bit like that. I'm always the one that speaks up in the room. That goes back to my university days, maybe. But I think generally you see things when you're engaged in the system, which I was. So I was a very involved parent in the school system, and then you see stuff, and eventually you go, this doesn't seem right. And so you start talking to people, you start trying to figure out why. And then you hear more and more, and it just sits wrong with you. It was a total fluke that I ended up getting involved in legal issues. As I said, I'm not a lawyer. I had little to no awareness of the law before I suddenly more or less found myself sitting in front of a court case. And I looked at it. It was a labor case of the BC Teachers Federation against the government. And I looked at it and I went, this judge got played. I knew that judge got played because I knew I'd been so engaged that I knew the precipitating events. And so I was fortunate that at that time, self-representation had just become sort of more normalized. And so I was able to, without actually having to hire a lawyer, I was able to go into court to speak directly to the judge. I'm not here to say that went well. I got spanked, but it sparked an interest, and gradually I built my capacity to the point where I could understand partly, and I think that the really important thing is how the law affects our day-to-day life. So I was there engaging in PAC meetings, at school board committees. I was writing letters to the editor, and completely and always opposed by the union and the university professors and so on. But completely unbeknownst to me, at the same time, those people were in court growing their power base within the law while eroding the power base of parents. And being able to see that in the moment is sort of the challenge. And even I was late to the game, but we are now at a point where it's, I with this MAID thing coming down the pipe, it's a matter of life and death.
Yeah. We've had a really big day today in terms of the things that we've learned. I'm very thankful to all of our panelists. We've only just scratched the surface. The whole idea of putting together a panel with people from various communities and who've engaged in different ways with different tools was to let people know who are watching that you can engage in these processes too and figure out, how these things work. I moved my attention from reading tax policy and corporate structure documents for small businesses and trusts over to reading school policies. It happened to be something that I could do. And then I just followed the threads, followed the references, and where does this get its justification from? And so I went and read that policy, and where does that get its justification from? So that it gave me a broader understanding and a bigger vocabulary. Now we're in a particular moment in history, and perhaps it's an opportune one, where diversity, equity, and inclusion has finally come under fire. And we're seeing in the states last year in the state legislative season just how many policies were brought into law to slow down the process of access to gender affirming care for minors, the affirmation in schools. We're seeing it all over the world. And Canada, of course, as we know, is quite far behind. But very topical to have our next speaker. And David was unable to join us in person, but he recorded a video on diversity, equity, and inclusion, the research that's behind it that supports it, or rather that does not support it, and ties to the overarching theme, or ties our central concerns today about gender ideology and books in schools and parents' rights under the umbrella and nesting under DEI. So I'm going to share my screen here. I want to thank all of our panelists again. For our viewers and attendees, there's a document that's coming together, and I've been on lots of Zooms, but not a webinar like this. So a document is coming together with links relevant to all the panel discussions today that we're going to send out by email to all of the people who signed up for this event. And if I can get it into the chat before the end of David Haskell's presentation, I will do that for you to have it at your fingertips today.